All right. What we learned this year is Tampa Bay is a bad matchup for Boston. They are. And it showed, well, some things. And this is the thing, Boston went on this great run this year, and Bruce Cassidy wins Coach of the Year, and Bruins fans kept getting on me because I wasn't jumping on the bandwagon, and sometimes on my power rankings I had them down around 10th or 11th because they were not playing very well. They had a stretch where they won, I think it was 3 out of 15, something along those lines, and yet everybody was like, oh, nope, they're clearly the best team in the league. And I thought, I don't think that they are. Then we hit the pause. They had a large lead atop the league when it comes to the overall points. They win the President's Trophy. And people point and go, that's your jinx. No, not really. Boston doesn't need an extra jinx. It's true. When they've won the President's Trophy, they've never won anything, and it's happened multiple times. But that's not the problem. They've lost every single Stanley Cup playoffs they've been in, other than 2011, since 1972. So this is a team that I know people say, oh, the league favors them, but it really doesn't show when you look at the Stanley Cup results. And I think this is a team that may be on the verge of a downswing, and they're going to be the sexy pick to take a bit of a dive, and I understand why. Don Sweeney's got quite the job ahead of him as general manager. He's been an excellent general manager for the Boston Bruins. He's done a good job, but this is where the rubber hits the road. This is where the 2015 draft really bites you in the you know what, because they didn't draft Barzell, they didn't draft Besser, they didn't draft Connor, they didn't draft all these guys. They got DeBrusk. DeBrusk's a good top six forward, don't get me wrong, but is Boreal, Senyshyn, that was a miss. So their top six for next year right now is projected to be, of course, let's call them not the perfection line, because they're not. There's no such thing as perfection. Anybody, oh, this guy's perfect. Great, now he's going to make a mistake. Marchand, Bergeron, Pasternak, they're fantastic. They do need to be split up a bit because you need to have more than one scoring line. DeBrusk, Krejci, and Kasha, sometimes the best line that Boston had going for them in these playoffs. And yet, Krejci at 34, Bergeron at 35, Marchand at 32. You've got three of your top six on the wrong side of 30 in a league that keeps getting younger. And Coyle, Studnicka I have on the board because Coyle can fill in as top six either as need be due to injury, because Bergeron gets hurt at times, Krejci gets hurt at times, so Coyle can jump in, or if the Bruins decide to move Krejci at some point. And it's something they've looked at in the past, and then Krejci would play his way out of it. But with his cap hit and with his contract being up next year, it's possible that Boston looks to move him at some point this coming year. And Studnicka, I like his potential. I think Boston's going to have to start looking for more goals from younger guys. I think this is where you give Trent Frederick a real shot at the lineup. I think this is where a guy like Studnicka, you give him a chance to grow. Not so much Bjork. Anders Bjork, he tries. I just don't think the offense is there. Where the concern as a Bruins fan comes in for me is on the blue line. So we'll talk about who's potentially leaving as UFAs, and I've seen people saying, oh, it's fine, one of them should go. We'll get into which one in a minute. But Grzelcyk, McAvoy, Lauzon, and Carlo, that's not a top four that's going to put fear into very many teams. And it's really lacking some punch. It really is. I like Lauzon. I'd rather see him on the third pairing. I'd rather not see him on the second. And your other option is John Moore. And Moore is not a top four defenseman in the National Hockey League. And so this is a blue line that if that's what happens, if they let the other guys go, this is not going to be good enough. This is a defense that's going to have some problems. I like all four of those defensemen, but as a top four, I don't think it gets it done. And then in net, Tuukka Rask. Yeah, I do think Tuukka Rask will be back. I think all of the talk about him leaving the bubble and all this, honestly, yeah, it'll blow over, and he's still going to be Boston's goalie next year, I would think, for a last run. He's 33 years of age. I don't think he's going to play until he's 38 or 39. I do get the feeling this will be his last year. I do. And Halak at 35. This may be his last year in Boston as well. Because, again, he's 35 years of age, and they're both looking at the end of their contracts, which means Vlader may very well get a look this year. Because Boston's goaltending prospects, I know they've got Swayman coming up too, But I do have some concerns about the in-between. Because this is a team that, while Rask is a Vezina-nominated goaltender, and he's been excellent for years, at some point that starts to fall off. Halak at 35. We probably are looking at his last year in Boston. It's a matter of what happens then. And where it reminds me of is when Moog and Lemelin were this great tandem for Boston and everything looked great, and then all of a sudden both goaltenders gone, and then Boston's net was kind of a mess for almost a decade after that, where you had some good goaltenders, but it wasn't necessarily what you needed in the playoffs. Byron Dafoe was a very good goaltender, but in a playoff round. So that's where Boston is right now, and in my eyes, it feels sort of like those Boston Bruins of the late '80s, early '90s, and then all of a sudden they just fell right off the map. They were terrible, and then they drafted Joe Thornton. They got good, then they got terrible again, and it sort of feels like we might be on the precipice of Boston taking that fall. And there's plenty of people watching this who can be like, oh, well, like this video just because he's saying Boston's probably going to fall. But I don't see them being President's Trophy winners 2 years in a row. It doesn't normally happen. And I don't see them being the best team in the league. I didn't think they were necessarily the best team in the league during the regular season. And yes, that may very well be that I was being too hard on the Bruins. And it may very well be that they were just winning a lot of games and not necessarily proving they were the best team in the league and winning those games. They were just one of the better teams in the league. Their cap space for next year looks great. $14.4 million. They look fine. Now, McAvoy's up in 2 years, so I guess you can look ahead to that. But this is where it's interesting. They don't really have any young guns coming into like contract years, so they don't have like a Pettersson Hughes situation. They don't have to worry about a Rope Hintz type coming up and hey, I might want some real money. But because they're an older roster and they don't have a lot of young prospects coming up, that $14.4 million in cap space is probably going to go up next year. So, I don't know. The UFAs are leaving her Krug and Chara. And by all indications, I think Krug's going to go. Now, Krug may very well go if he wants, say, $7 or $8 million a year. And he may very well get that, and he may very well prove he's worth it. I don't know if Boston has that desire to keep him around. Of the two defensemen, I lean more towards keeping Chara for one more year, because Chara can help with this for a lesser price than Krug. And in the playoffs, I didn't think Krug played very well. I did not think that Torrey Krug had a fantastic season overall. And while I love Torrey Krug, I have since he came in and made his debut against the Rangers in the playoffs, and he scored a bunch of goals, and he looked great. If they move on from Krug, I would kind of understand it. One thing with Don Sweeney is with $14.4 million in cap, and if you decide you're not going to keep Krug and Chara, you can make a play for Pietrangelo. You can make a play for somebody else to come onto the roster, probably a defenseman or two, and you might be able to save some money off what you're going to have to spend on Krug. You might get a better two-way defenseman than you're going to get with Krug. Krug's great on the power play. He's very solid offensively. 5-on-5 defensively. He can be an adventure. So this is a chance for Sweeney with that cap space to maybe change up this top four, which is, I think, what they need. And again, you have to look at this as Don Sweeney for next year. And Cam Neely has to be looking at it this way as well. We have Rask and Halak for one more year, minimum. With Rask, he may very well sign an extension, but I get the feeling he probably retires after next season. But with the top six that's getting older, you kind of have to go for it one last time. You kind of have to say, you know what? We're gonna spend some money. We're gonna go to the cap, and we're gonna do our best to get back there. Now next fall, next summer, whenever we see the free agency happen, because things seem to change all the time right now with that. Krejci, Kuraly, Rask, and Halak are all UFA, and that would free up a ton of money next summer for Boston. But again, if this team falls off this year, I would not be surprised to see Krejci moved. Kuraly, I don't think so. I think Sean Kuraly stays in Boston. I think he's proven he can be a useful bottom six guy. He can put in a goal here and there as well. But the goaltending would get completely revamped next year in all likelihood. And then we'll see what Don Sweeney comes up with. He'll have the money next year to do it, but he's also got an aging roster to deal with as well. 2021 RFAs, The only ones got to worry about are Kasha and Carlo. I love Andre Kasha. He couldn't score in the playoffs, and absolutely snake bit. And hopefully Andre Kasha gets it figured out next year, because I liked him in Anaheim. He was one of my favorite players there, and I'm glad he's with the Bruins. I hope he gets the goal scoring hands back. He's shown he can score at the NHL level. Just it just didn't work out for him in the playoffs. Now they've only got 2 draft picks in the top 3 rounds. So if you're a Bruins fan and you don't feel like watching the draft on the 6th, I don't blame you, because there's no Boston. And I can't see Don Sweeney making moves to get extra draft picks. This is not a team that's in any position to acquire extra draft picks. They've got the number 58 pick as their first, and then the number 89. Those are their own draft picks in rounds 2 and 3, and that's as far as things are going to go for them. This is a franchise that it does feel like their contending days. They might be able to squeeze one more year out of it. I think they might be able to squeeze one more year out of it. They were President's Trophy winners. I don't want to diminish that or what they were able to do, but I don't know. It does feel like, that 2011 Cup, that's gone now. We're going to be 10 years away from that when this season hits, and it might be time to look at what the next generation is going to look like. But you've still got guys hanging on from the previous generation. You've got some good young players. Pasternak is not an old player. DeBrusk isn't old. Kasha's not old. And, of course, I've got Richie on the board, because I don't think he's going to play for Boston next year. I think they're going to try to trade him. I think what happened in the playoffs, I think they're done with it. All the complaining about, Richie, why didn't Richie get suspended? Hey, Boston suspended him. They benched him. And honestly, I would not be that upset if Boston decided we're just going to trade him at this point, rather than trying to re-sign him to extension. Or, Nick Ritchie may very well find himself somewhere else. And yeah, we'll see what happens with them. But it does feel like we're about to witness Boston taking a bit of a dive. And whether it's to second or third in the division, whether it's a team that magically we look and go, hey, Boston's not in the playoffs, what happened? Or maybe they stay up near the top and then we see where they're at in the playoffs. Be interesting to see what happens. But let me know your thoughts regarding the Bruins in the comments section below. And I know how most people feel about the Bruins. I'm well aware. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.